Good Margaret. Going door to door as I do, Minister, as often as I possibly can, during the night in Raheny, I came across two families who have children in dire need of help from your government. One family has a child who is in need of a psychological assessment in their school. There are 12 such children in that school who need a psychological assessment. 3 will be able to get that assessment that they need. This child is not in that 3, and this parent is now faced with the prospect of either going privately at the cost of some €650 or not having an assessment at all. So I want to know what your government plans to do to ensure that every child who needs an assessment can obtain an assessment so that they can maximise their potential. More worryingly, though, and more distressing, was another family I came across who have no difficulty in me naming them, Claire and Mark, and their daughter Abigail. And Abigail was diagnosed with autism at age 2. And as difficult news, as difficult it is to get that kind of news about the daughter that you love dearly, and they have 2 smaller children as well, they have been fighting a war since the date of that diagnosis to get any sort of early intervention from the HSE to benefit their child. They have now, in most recent days, been told that the earliest that they will get an intervention, if you like, help from the early intervention team in North Dublin is about 6 months' time. So effectively the child will almost be 5 years of age, almost 3 years since her diagnosis, that she will get some help. And there are about another, I think she's about 150 on the list currently, and there are hundreds and hundreds of children on this list. So unfortunately in this country, Minister, not only do you have to deal with the difficulty of managing a child with autism, the difficulty of managing every other aspect of your family life in relation to this, looking after other children as well, doing your absolute best for this child, you also have to embark on a war with the state. And unless you kick and shout and roar and scream, it appears that you get absolutely nowhere, and it's completely and utterly exhausting. Now, I don't know of any other European country that would have a waiting list of this nature for a child this vulnerable who needs this intervention. There may have been an argument a number of years ago in the pit of despair of an economic recession that there was no money. We could possibly have argued over and back as to priorities and budgets and all the rest of it. But now, in the current circumstance, where there clearly is resources, I want to know why Abigail will be waiting 3 years to get access to an early intervention team so that she can begin the road of maximising her potential as a little girl.
Minister.
I want to thank the Senator for raising the issue of access to children's early intervention services and psychological assessment in North Dublin. As the Senator is aware, there is a very high demand for early intervention services, and regrettably there are now very significant waiting times in Dublin North City and County, as well as other areas. There are a growing number of local factors driving this demand, including the increasing child population and growth in terms of the number of children presenting with complex needs. The early intervention service for this area receives, on average, 13 to 14 new referrals a month. A high level of requests for assessment of need are also received, and these are typically carried out by therapists who also work in the early intervention service. From January to August this year, 1,251 assessments of need were completed by the HSE Disability Service in North Dublin. The HSE fully acknowledges the stress that delays in access to services and assessment can cause to families and is actively working to address the waiting times. The HSE Disability Service in Dublin, North City and County has begun recruiting for 5 additional posts, one in each of the following services: psychology, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, physiotherapy and social work. These additional staff will further contribute to a reduction of waiting times for early intervention services across the area. The local HSE Disability Service is currently engaged with the HSE nationally in the reconfiguration of children's services to deliver a new model of assessment and intervention which would provide a clear pathway for children aged 0 to 18 years. The Progressing Disability Services Programme aims to achieve a national, equitable approach in service provision for all children based on their individual need and regardless of their disability, where they live or where they go to school. The Progressing Disability Services Programme is doing this by forming partnerships between all the disability organisations in an area and pooling their staff with expertise in the different types of disabilities to form local children's disability network teams, who will provide services for children with a significant disability regardless of what their disability is. Evidence to date from areas where this has been rolled out shows that implementation of this programme will also have a positive impact on waiting lists both for assessments and therapies. Senators will be aware that funding for an additional 100 therapy posts was secured as part of Budget 2019. These additional posts, along with the reconfiguration of services and other initiatives, are expected to have a significant positive impact on waiting times for early intervention and assessment of need. It will also help meet the needs of children and young people in a more efficient, effective and equitable manner.
Thank you very much. Supplementary, Senator.
With the greatest respect, Minister, what I want to know from you, okay, and I know you're a compassionate individual and I know you feel strongly about this issue, I want to know what length of time you feel is reasonable from the diagnosis of a child, just like Abigail, to the beginning of her intervention. What is an appropriate length of time? What time are you aiming for? What is your vision? Do you feel that 3 years is too long? I'm sure you do. What time space do we feel is reasonable in this scenario for families like this, for children like Abigail? Because I just don't think it's good enough for a family to be that stressed over an issue like this, over having to deal with this diagnosis over many years to come, having other members of the family to deal with it as well, all the supports, everybody around the family is going to be obviously clued into this issue, and then this war, this constant state of conflict that you have to have with agencies who are supposed to be surrounding you with care, surrounding you with compassion. You would feel, as it happens in other jurisdictions, you get a diagnosis like this and you automatically feel as if there's a team of people who are working with you and the child to improve the circumstance. Completely different in Ireland. Completely different. It's as if you're almost completely abandoned and you have to work through this by yourself. And the stress, as you can appreciate, is quite substantial. So please, could you please just let me know what timescale you think is appropriate from the time a child gets a diagnosis to the time that the early intervention team can click into place, and are we working towards that time frame? And then we can have a sense that we're all working together to achieve this end. Okay? That's my point.
Senator. Okay, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. In response to the Senator's question, I mean, I understand what it's like for a child to be diagnosed with needs, for a child not to be able to get the services. I'm a parent of a child with special needs. I'm, like yourself, a former school principal. So I understand very, very well. But I also understand, as you do, and you formerly held the position I did, Senator, at one stage as a Minister of State, the challenges that are within the system. And you referred in your opening speech that you understood a few years ago why every child didn't get what they need, but now you can't understand why every child doesn't get what they need, because that there's the inference you made was that there's plenty of resources there. There isn't plenty of resources. There isn't sufficient resources there in the country. Despite the largest health budget ever in the history of the state, over €17 billion next year, it still won't go anywhere near the amount of demand that's put on that budget. And whether that's in the area of children with special needs, or whether it's in the previous debate for Alzheimer's, and that's our elderly, who I know you care a great deal for as well, they're all competing needs. And we have the acute sector of the hospitals, we have the nursing home sectors, we have all of it competing. All strands of society. So to answer your question directly, it is immaterial what I think of what's a reasonable time, or what's the time that any child should be left waiting. It is well, I don't mind whether you accept it or not. I make it a matter of absolute fact. It is completely immaterial. It is completely immaterial what my opinion is, or what my belief is.
If you're a minister in the department, you must have a view of
Senator,
what waiting time is.
I don't mind what you accept or what you don't accept.
There's a procedure here.
It is completely immaterial. We are working on a finite budget. There is competing demands for that budget across a wide variety of sectors of it.
I genuinely don't want to do this.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not allowed. I can't allow you in again, unfortunately. And thank you, Minister. And thank you,
however,
Senator.
just to assure the Senator, we have noted his concerns and his interest in the area, obviously, that he represents, and his desire to see those waiting lists. And we will continue with Minister McGrath's area to continue to work with the HSE, who are the service delivery organisation, to reduce those waiting times and to continue to invest in it as resources do allow.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you.